when a ruthless biker kicked a dog for fun. He was completely unaware that Jason Statham is the owner. What started as a peaceful afternoon walk would soon escalate into a dramatic confrontation, proving once again that you should never mess with a man's dog. Jason Statham was not a man you'd easily associate with tenderness, but there he was, sitting cross-legged on the pavement in Brooklyn Heights, carefully brushing the fur of a golden retriever named Buddy. Known for his intense action roles and steely demeanor, Jason looked entirely at ease as he scratched behind the dog's ears, muttering something softly. The bustling energy of the movie set seemed to melt away as he focused on his furry co-star. The film crew was hard at work. Cameras were being adjusted, microphones were tested, and assistants were busy ensuring everything was in place for the next take. The scene was set in a charming Brooklyn neighborhood with red brick buildings and cobblestone streets, perfect for the gritty urban atmosphere the director wanted to capture. Despite all the noise and movement, Jason's attention remained fixed on Buddy. "Who's a good boy, then?" Jason said in a voice far gentler than anyone expected. He held up a small treat, and Buddy's tail wagged furiously. "You've got to earn it first. Shake." Buddy lifted his paw obediently, and Jason shook it like he was greeting an old friend. "Statham, we need you in position," shouted one of the assistant directors, a young man who looked slightly nervous approaching the actor. Jason glanced up, his trademark intensity briefly flashing in his eyes before softening as he turned back to Buddy. "1 second, mate," he replied, tossing the treat to Buddy, who caught it mid-air. Jason stood up and brushed off his pants. "You watch him for a moment, yeah?" The dog keeper, a cheerful woman named Susan, approached with a leash in hand. "Don't worry, Jason, I've got him." Jason handed the leash over but leaned down one last time. "You behave, Buddy. No getting into trouble, all right?" As Jason walked toward the set, one of the crew members, a sound technician, whispered to another, "I didn't know Statham was such a dog lover." The other replied with a grin, "Yeah, he's full of surprises. But don't tell him I said that. I like my job." Jason overheard, but only smirked as he adjusted his jacket. Buddy barked once, as if encouraging him to go knock out his scene. During a break between scenes, Jason returned to Buddy, who was lounging on a soft blanket under a nearby tree. Susan, the dog keeper, greeted Jason with a warm smile. "He's been waiting for you. Refused to lie down properly until you came back. Loyal little fella, isn't he?" Jason crouched down, rubbing Buddy's head. Susan nodded. "He's got a good instinct for people. He knows you're someone he can trust." Jason chuckled, glancing around the set. "Trust? I'm not so sure about that. He probably just knows I've got the treats." Susan laughed. "Whatever it is, he's got a bond with you. Not all actors take time to connect with the animals on set." Jason shrugged, his hand never leaving Buddy's fur. "If you're going to work with someone, doesn't matter if they're human or not, you got to build trust, right?" As the conversation continued, several crew members stopped to watch. It was rare to see someone as intense as Jason Statham completely at ease, cracking jokes, and genuinely enjoying himself. One of the younger crew members approached hesitantly, holding a phone. Mr. Statham? Would you mind if I took a picture of you and Buddy? My daughter's a huge fan, and she loves dogs." Jason looked up, then back at Buddy. "What do you think, Buddy? Should we pose for a photo?" Buddy barked, his tail wagging enthusiastically. Jason grinned, sitting back on the ground. "All right, but make it quick. We've got work to do." The crew member snapped the photo, thanking Jason profusely. As he walked away, Jason leaned closer to Buddy. "See, mate? You're more famous than me now." The next scene involved Jason and Buddy approaching a gritty biker bar. The set designers had done a stellar job transforming a corner of Brooklyn into a tough-looking hangout for motorcycle enthusiasts. Motorcycles were lined up outside, and actors dressed as bikers loitered near the entrance, smoking and laughing loudly. As Jason walked Buddy toward the bar, the dog hesitated, his ears perking up. "What's the matter, boy?" Jason asked, kneeling down to check on him. "Not a fan of the leather jackets?" Susan, watching from the side, called out, He's... Probably picking up on the energy. Dogs can sense tension, you know. Jason nodded thoughtfully. Smart lad, aren't you? He patted Buddy's head and stood. Don't worry, I'll keep you safe. As they approached the bar, one of the bikers, a burly man with a beard down to his chest, stepped forward. Hey, what's this? We're letting in lapdogs now. Jason stopped, his eyes narrowing. Careful, mate, he's got more bite than you think. The biker laughed, but there was a hint of unease in his voice. Relax, man. I'm just messing around. Jason stared at him for a moment longer, then smirked. Good. Let's keep it that way. Buddy growled softly, and Jason tugged the leash gently. Easy, boy. No need to waste your energy on him. The tension in the air was palpable, but Jason's calm yet commanding presence kept things from escalating. As he walked past the bikers, he could hear one of them muttering under his breath, but he chose to ignore it. Buddy stayed close to his side, his loyalty clear in every step. Once they were inside the bar, the atmosphere changed. The dim lighting and loud music made it feel like another world entirely. Jason glanced around, taking in every detail. This wasn't just a scene for the movie. It was the beginning of a much bigger story, one that neither he nor Buddy could have anticipated. The interior of the biker bar was as rough as the outside promised. Dim lighting highlighted patched leather jackets, graffiti-covered walls, and old rock music blasting from a jukebox in the corner. Jason walked in with Buddy close to his side. The dog's ears were perked and his nose twitched as he sniffed the smoky air. Jason scanned the room, his sharp eyes taking in every detail, not as a movie star, but as someone who'd been in dangerous situations before. The bartender, a wiry man with tattoos snaking up his arms, nodded at Jason. You're not the usual type to come in here. What brings you and the pup? Just passing through. Jason replied evenly, his voice calm but firm. Thought I'd check the place out. Buddy let out a soft bark, making a few patrons glance over. A large group of bikers sat in the far corner, their laughter loud and aggressive as they downed their drinks. One of them, a tall man with a shaved head, noticed Jason and Buddy. He nudged his companions and pointed. Hey, look at that! Hollywood's finest brought a little mutt to a big boy's bar. He jeered. Jason turned slightly, his gaze locking onto the man's. His expression didn't change, but the air in the room grew tense. Before Jason could reply, the waitress, a young woman named Maggie, stepped between them. Leave him alone, Max, she said, her voice steady but her hands gripping her notepad tightly. He's not bothering anyone. Max leaned back, grinning. Oh, come on, Maggie. We're just having a little fun. Your kind of fun usually ends with broken chairs and bruised ribs, she shot back. Jason raised an eyebrow, impressed by her courage. He could tell Maggie wasn't the type to back down easily, but the bikers were clearly used to getting their way. He crouched next to Buddy and whispered, You'd probably handle this better than me, wouldn't you, mate? Buddy wagged his tail as if agreeing. Max stood, towering over Maggie. You should watch that mouth of yours, girl. Someone might take it the wrong way. Jason straightened, his presence immediately commanding. She's got nothing to watch. But you do. Sit down before you embarrass yourself. The room went silent. Max stared at Jason, his hands curling into fists. For a moment it seemed like he might try something, but the tension broke when the bartender slammed a glass down on the counter. Enough, the bartender barked. If you want to fight, take it outside. Otherwise, sit down and shut up. Max hesitated, then growled, This isn't over, before slumping back into his seat. Maggie exhaled, glancing at Jason. Thanks for that. These guys have been making my life hell. Jason nodded. You all right? Yeah. Just another day in paradise, she said, forcing a smile. She looked down at Buddy. He's cute. Doesn't really fit in here, though. Jason smirked. Neither do I, but here we are. After the encounter, Jason decided it was time to leave. He didn't want any more trouble, and Buddy didn't seem comfortable in the hostile environment. As they made their way toward the door, Max and his friends continued to glare, their whispers barely audible over the jukebox. Jason didn't need to hear them to know what they were planning. Trouble always had a way of announcing itself. Outside, the air was crisp and cool, a welcome contrast to the smoky interior of the bar. Jason crouched down to adjust Buddy's leash. "Well, that could have gone worse," he said, scratching the dog behind the ears. Before he could stand up, the door of the bar slammed open, and Max stepped out with two of his friends. "Hey, tough guy," Max called out. "You think you can just walk out after disrespecting me?" Jason sighed, standing slowly. "Disrespect? Mate, you've got a funny definition of the word." Max took a step forward, his face twisting into a sneer. "You think you're better than me because you're some big-shot movie star?" Jason's eyes narrowed, his voice low and calm. "Number, I think I'm smarter than you because I know when to walk away." Buddy barked sharply, sensing the tension. Jason placed a reassuring hand on the dog's head. "Stay," he said softly. One of Max's friends laughed. "What are you going to do? Use the dog to fight us?" Jason tilted his head slightly, his lips curving into a faint smirk. "He's got more brains than the three of you combined, so maybe." Max lunged forward, but before he could reach Jason, a sharp whistle cut through the air. Maggie appeared at the bar's entrance, holding her phone up. "Sheriff's on the way. You want to explain to him why you're picking fights in the street?" Max froze, his face darkening. "This ain't over, Himatrius. Messus autoris sacertio." They'd muttered before turning and stalking off, his friends following reluctantly. Jason turned to Maggie, nodding in appreciation. "You've got good timing." She shrugged. "Just doing what I can. Thanks for standing up for me earlier." Jason looked down at Buddy, who wagged his tail. "We're a team," he said, smiling faintly. Jason and Buddy left the bar behind, walking down the quiet streets of Brooklyn Heights. Buddy seemed to relax, his tail wagging as they moved away from the tension of the biker bar. Jason glanced at his watch, thinking about the next day's shoot. Suddenly, Buddy stopped, sniffing the ground. Jason frowned as the dog picked up a discarded sausage from the pavement. "Oi, Buddy, drop it," he said firmly, but the dog had already taken a bite. Within minutes, Buddy's demeanor changed. His tail stopped wagging, and he let out a soft whine. Jason knelt down, alarmed. "Buddy." "What's wrong, mate?" Buddy's legs wobbled and he collapsed onto his side. Panic shot through Jason. "Stay with me, boy," he said, scooping the dog into his arms. He sprinted toward the nearest veterinary clinic, his heart pounding. The weight of Buddy in his arms felt heavier with every step. He burst through the clinic doors, shouting, "I need help. My dog's been poisoned." Dr. Harper, a young but confident veterinarian, rushed over. "Get him on the table now," she ordered. Her team sprang into action, checking Buddy's vitals and administering an antidote. Jason paced the waiting room, his fists clenched. He replayed the evening in his mind, wondering how things had gone so wrong. Maggie's voice echoed in his head. "They've been making my life hell." After what felt like hours, Dr. Harper emerged. "He's stable for now. You got him here just in time." Jason exhaled, relief washing over him. "Thank you, Doc." Harper nodded. "Do you know what he ate? We'll need to run tests, but it looked deliberate, like someone laced it with poison." Jason's expression darkened. "Deliberate? Someone tried to hurt him?" Harper placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll do everything we can. He's strong, and he's got you looking out for him." Jason looked through the window at Buddy, who was resting but breathing steadily. He made a silent promise. Whoever did this would pay. Jason stayed by Buddy's side for the rest of the night at the clinic, his mind racing. The thought of someone deliberately trying to harm Buddy filled him with anger and determination. Jason wasn't the type to let things slide, especially when it came to someone, or something, he cared about. As Buddy rested on a soft blanket, his breathing steady but weak, Jason stroked the dog's fur and whispered, We'll get through this, boy. I'll make sure whoever did this doesn't get away with it." The next morning, Dr. Harper approached with an update. Buddy's doing better, but he's not out of the woods yet. Keep him calm and hydrated. And Jason, I've sent the sausage to a lab for testing. If it was poisoned, we'll know exactly what we're dealing with." Jason nodded. "Thanks, Doc. You've done more than enough already." As he carried Buddy out of the clinic, his phone buzzed. It was Maggie. "Jason, I don't know if this is related, but I saw one of those bikers outside the bar last night. He was holding a bag of food and laughing with his buddies." Jason's jaw tightened. Do you think they had anything to do with it?" Maggie hesitated. "I can't say for sure, but those guys have been acting like they own the neighborhood. It wouldn't surprise me." Jason's grip on the phone tightened. "Thanks for letting me know. I'll handle it." Maggie sighed. "Just be careful, okay? Those guys aren't just bullies. They're dangerous." Jason hung up, his mind made up. He wasn't going to let these men terrorize the community or harm Buddy without consequences. Jason knew better than to handle this alone. Despite his tough exterior and action-packed reputation, he understood that real justice required the law. He made his way to the sheriff's office, where Sheriff Hank Morrison was sitting at his desk going through paperwork. Hank looked up as Jason entered. "Well, if it isn't Jason Statham, what brings you here?" Jason placed a small evidence bag containing the piece of poisoned sausage on the desk. "Someone tried to poison my dog last night." Hank raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that?" Jason's tone was firm. "The vet's running tests, but I know what I saw. And I think I know who's behind it." Hank leaned back in his chair. "Let me guess. The bikers?" Jason nodded. "They've been causing trouble for months, haven't it, Statham?" Hank sighed, rubbing his temples. "More than I'd like to admit. We've had reports of harassment, vandalism, and intimidation, but no one's willing to press charges. They're scared." Jason's eyes narrowed. "Not anymore. I'm pressing charges, and I'll testify if it comes to that." Hank studied Jason for a moment, then nodded. "All right. I'll need a formal statement and any evidence you can provide. If this is as serious as you say, we'll make a move." Jason leaned forward, his voice low but resolute. "It's serious, and I'm not letting them get away with it." That evening, Hank and a few deputies prepared to raid the bikers' hideout, a rundown garage on the outskirts of the neighborhood. Jason insisted on coming along, though Hank initially resisted. "You're not law enforcement, Jason. This isn't a movie," Hank warned. Jason smirked. "No, but I've handled worse. Besides, you'll need someone who knows how to talk to these guys." Reluctantly, Hank agreed, and they set out together. As they arrived, the sound of engines revving and loud music filled the air. The bikers were gathered outside, laughing and drinking. Hank signaled his deputies to surround the area. As they approached, Jason stepped forward, his calm yet intimidating presence drawing the bikers' attention. Max spotted him first, his expression turning into a sneer. "Well, look who it is. The dog lover. You lose your mutt, mate?" Jason's voice was ice cold. "You know exactly what happened, Max. And you're going to answer for it." Max laughed, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about." Hank stepped in, his badge gleaming under the dim light. "We'll see about that. You're all under investigation for multiple charges, including animal cruelty. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." The bikers exchanged nervous glances, but Max stood his ground. "You've got no proof." Jason stepped closer, his voice low and deadly. "You poisoned my dog. You think I'd let you get away with that?" For a moment, no one moved. Then one of the deputies found a bag of suspicious-looking food inside the garage, matching the sausage Buddy had eaten. That was all Hank needed to start making arrests. Max lunged at Jason in a last-ditch effort to fight, but Jason sidestepped easily, grabbing his arm and pinning him to the ground. "That was your second mistake," Jason said, his voice calm but filled with menace. "The first was messing with my dog. With the bikers in custody, the neighborhood began to feel safer. Maggie and other locals expressed their gratitude to Jason, who brushed it off modestly. "I didn't do it alone," he said. nodding toward Hank. Buddy made a full recovery, thanks to Dr. Harper and her team. The bond between Jason and his furry companion only grew stronger after the ordeal. One afternoon, as Jason sat on a park bench with Buddy lying at his feet, Maggie stopped by with coffee. "How's the star of the show doing?" she asked, scratching Buddy behind the ears. Jason smiled. "He's tougher than he looks. Aren't you, mate?" Buddy barked happily, earning a laugh from both of them. Maggie sat down beside Jason, her tone turning serious. "You really made a difference, you know. Those bikers had the whole neighborhood scared." Jason shrugged. "I just did what needed to be done, and I wasn't about to let them get away with hurting him." As the sun set over Brooklyn Heights, Jason looked down at Buddy, his loyal companion who had been through so much. "We've got each other, don't we, boy?" Buddy wagged his tail in agreement, and Jason felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in a long time. Hope you enjoyed this story. Turn notifications on to get a new story daily.